Hi, I'm Natasha and I'm the flower horticulturist here at Bessie Seeds. We get a lot of questions about window boxes and planters, and I'm going to plant up a window box here and show you how it's done and give you some tips and pointers. Today I'm going to be doing a window box for an eastern exposure, so it's going to be a good amount of shade. I know that that's a big question that a lot of people have. It's difficult to find plants for shade. So this is a sterile potting mix, and you can just buy it by the bag. If you have planters from the previous season, you can always reuse your soil. Just make sure to mix it in with new sterile stuff. And what I do to prep it is I add a couple of amendments. One of the products I use to help retain moisture in the planters and window boxes is called Soil Moist, and it comes with 40 individual packets of a polymer granule that looks like sea salt. And basically what happens is when you add moisture to this, it expands almost 100 times its size, or maybe like 30 or 40 times its size, giving you these kind of pebble-sized jelly blobs that are really great for maintaining and retaining moisture within the soil, even when the soil has completely dried out. So basically, I have scissors here, but I just ripped up the plastic. There's a table on here that shows you the size of your planter and how many little packets you're going to need. And I know that I'll probably use about a dozen or so in this window box. And this is the first thing to add when you come to amendments. I also have the Smart Coat, which is a granular fertilizer that I put in, but it only needs to go in the first inch or 2 inches of soil, while the polymer can go in about 4 to 6 inches down. You can really mix it up. So you just take it and you sprinkle it, and it is time consuming when you have a whole bunch of little packets and really big planters, but that's part of the Zen process of gardening. I use my hands. You can use a trowel, and you just literally kind of turn over the soil and work it in. And you'll notice that this is nice, light, fluffy soil, and as I turn it over, you can see it's a darker color. So it's got a good amount of moisture in it, which is great before starting. Okay, so I have the Soil Moist in here, and I've mixed it all in the whole pot. Then I've got my Smart Coat time-release fertilizer. It's a granular fertilizer, and it's actually called hanging basket food, but it can be used for anything. It'll last up to 6 months in your planter, and it's 14-14-14. So it isn't too strong, which will allow me to use a liquid fertilizer on a regular basis through the summer as well to really maximize blooms and growth. I know that about a bottle of this will do one of these whole planters. So I'll do that, and then this is just kind of a loose mix in the top. You don't want to put it down too far. This is more, it needs to hit the water. Every time you water is going to help it. So, and right around the top. So now I've got my soil already on this side of the window box, and I've got my plants here. Again, it's for an eastern exposure, so I've chosen plants that are really great for the shade. I've got over here, I've got some non-stop red begonias, which is tuberous begonia, and these I've set out in peat moss, and they're ready to go. They've been sitting out for about 3 weeks. Okay, so you can see it has some growth started, some new little leaves that have just started to come out, and it's taken them about 3 weeks to actually start coming, so it does take a while for begonias to get going. I'll flip it over. You can see that there is some nice new root growth starting, and so I'm going to take them straight out of the tray that I've got here, and I'm going to set them in first, because I know exactly where these are going to go. These are more the backdrop in the center of the window boxes, and everything else that I've got are going to be around the edges, like vines and some filler flower. So I'm just going to I'm going to just lightly set them in, not too deep. They only need to be down a couple inches. And I'll pick out the best ones in the tray that have the growth. So normally I'll put 3 on either side. So I've got 3 here. And again, because this soil is really nice and loose, it's great. It's really easy to kind of wiggle them in. And so I don't cover them up completely, so I know exactly where they are when it comes for me to plant other things around them. So I have the begonias in. The next thing that I'm going to plant are vines. I've got, this is a great new vine in the market. It's called Goldfinger, and it's a potato vine. So Goldfinger is a combination of Marguerite, with the lime, beautiful lime color, and blackie, which is a potato vine that you know well for its distinctive black color. So the two combine really nicely. It's also quite a vigorous vine, trailer, so you don't have to plant them too close together. Sometimes it's easy to overcrowd a window box or a planter when you're starting with very young plants. If you can check the tags, make sure you know what sizes they are, what sizes they get to, because they will eventually crowd each other out, and a lot of times what will happen is you'll have two or three out of 5 or more plants that will dominate and you don't even see the other ones, or they die out. So I'm going to take these plugs and just place a few out. I always like to place things out before I commit to planting them. That way I get a better idea of balance and how it's going to look in the end. So what I planned on doing is setting these out, but I've also got another vine to mix in between, which is completely different in color and texture. I've got a plant called Wandering Jew. It's very common as a house plant, and if you actually have an apartment or a home where you don't get a lot of light, it is a really nice plant to have just as a house plant, because they don't really need a heck of a whole lot of light. So while I'm doing this, I might as well just do the one in front of it as well. Show you really how fast it can be done. Alright, so take some begonias. I'll set them out. There's a nice one. So set them like that, and I'll wiggle them in a little bit. I'll grab my vines. And because I'd like them all to look the same, I'll place the plants in roughly the same position. And these are going to have a couple weeks in the greenhouse before they're put outside, so they will fill out a little bit, which is nice. Now I do have one more plant that I'm going to stick in, and it's one that I think is underused in the landscape, especially willow planters. It's called Torrenia. And Torrenia is a mounding plant. It's a bit of a trailer. It'll get to be about 8 to 10 inches across, and I would say 8 inches tall. The flowers look very, very similar to a snapdragon, and the flowers on these are going to be nice and like a nice blue purple. So all the plants are in. Everybody's ready. I'll do a little firming around the edges. Another good thing to do is to make sure after you've planted up your window box, take that guy out, is to make sure that your soil is about an inch below the actual lip of the container or the box. That way when you water, the water is going to stay in the top and be absorbed into the soil and not just run right off the edges of the planter. Because I've had that happen plenty of times. So you just take your hand and you kind of really quickly press it down around the edges. It's time to water. Once everything's planted and you've got all your amendments in your soil and your plant situated, I'll hold it high up so it's more of a gentle rainfall than it is really intense stream of water. So you want to make sure you have holes drilled in the bottom if they don't already come, and that way you'll have great drainage, because what can happen is there can be a lot of root rot. A great tip if you live somewhere, if you have a really, really rainy season like we did last year here in Prince Edward Island, is to move your planters somewhere out of the direct rain, or tip them to their sides so that if the water buildup is quite high, it's going to drain out. And so that's how you do planters. Good luck and enjoy.
Edible Gardening Made Easy. I'm Alex Mitchell, a gardening writer, journalist and self-confessed edible gardening obsessive. Over the next 4 lectures, I'll be taking you through the basics of growing fruit and vegetables, From how to prepare the soil to the best crops to grow, tips for how to cultivate them, and ways to avoid pests eating them before you can. Even if you have never sown a seed in your life, this course will give you the confidence to grow delicious salads, herbs, tomatoes, carrots and much more, whether you have a huge garden or room only for a few pots. As I hope this course will show, you really don't need masses of time or space to grow great crops. Growing your own fruit and veg has never been more popular. Back at the turn of the millennium, when I discovered my obsession, I kept my tomato grow bags rather quiet. The only people growing their own veg in those days seemed to be middle-aged men, brewing red currant wine in the allotment shed to get away from their wives. 10 or so years later, and we're in the grip of a growing your own revolution. Everyone's doing it. Allotments have never been more sought after, and those tired of waiting for one, such as me, are now turning their back gardens into productive grow zones, intermingling their tulips with sun-warmed tomatoes and glossy chard. Maybe we've all just woken up to the fact that homegrown crops taste better. But I think there's more to it. Growing food gives us a satisfying connection to the soil and the seasons, particularly for those of us who live in cities. This course takes you through a whole growing year, so you can sow and plant as we go. This first lecture gets you all set.
Our Roblox hack tool is the best Roblox hack on the internet, as it's 100% safe and secure to use. The hacks can be detected by the game developer, so you will enjoy getting free Robux without anyone knowing you use a Roblox cheat. Our hack is very simple and effective. Visit us at anonymoustool.com.
For planting. We'll cover how to assess your growing site, soil preparation and digging, as well as an introduction to composting and wormeries. Lecture 2 covers sowing and runs through lots of delicious easy crops to try. Future lectures will cover summer and finally autumn and winter. I'm not going to cover every fruit and vegetable crop you can possibly grow. You may notice omissions such as main crop potatoes, asparagus, cabbage, Brussels sprouts and turnips. I've left some out because they're tricky for beginners, others because I don't think they give enough back when you grow them at home. This might be because they take up too much space or don't deliver taste-wise over shop-bought versions. Instead, I've chosen crops that will work even in small spaces, those that taste superior, can be grown with relative ease, and that will reward you with a plentiful, beautiful harvest. All the gardening methods in this course are organic. There are no nasty chemicals, and all the advice here is geared towards creating a garden run on organic lines. So, let's get on with preparing your edible Eden. You might be wondering if preparing soil is necessary. It can seem like a hassle when you really want to get on with the glamorous part of gardening, the planting. But it really is worth doing because, as the gardening veterans say, look after your soil and the plants will look after themselves. If your soil is fertile, weed-free and holds moisture well without becoming waterlogged, your plants won't need feeding or watering as often. You won't have to be in competition with weeds for space, water and nutrients, and they'll also be less susceptible to pests and diseases.